Mama, you are entering lesson 3. You've been talking about suffering for a little while, and I have one more lesson for you. This one's actually really important as you're going to tease out the different reasons for suffering and what do we do when we're hurting, how to find comfort and care, and to actually walk with your daughter when she's struggling. Now, a lot of us either go towards being a minimizer or a maximizer. We kind of have a bent, and I want you as mom to know which one you are. I tend to be a minimizer. It's kind of like pull your bootstraps up mentality, get over it. Do you know that those people are suffering more than you? If I was left up to my own human response to my girls, that's probably what they would get. Suck it up, okay? Anybody? Maybe I'm the only one. Then there's the other one who's like fully engaged and empathized, and your daughter has a slight little hangnail, and you've got to like nurture her and give her a chance to cry it out. And maybe there's just like, wow, she needs to stay home from school. This is really hard, okay? So we call that the maximizer, and we call my approach the minimizer. Know which side you fall on, and ask the Lord to help you to come a little bit more towards the middle. Because God is actually neither maximizer or a minimizer. He gets our suffering. He meets us where we're at. He empathizes with us. And he gently walks with us and helps bring us to a place of standing, a place where we can have confidence and courage. And he never leaves us. Often Christians will use the example of the Israelites, as they leave slavery and they're moving towards the promised land. And we talk a lot in that in-between wilderness where they're complaining. And I've heard a lot of parents try to teach their kids not to complain. I actually grew up in that kind of mentality where you need to be positive every day. You have a reason to be thankful. And though that is very, very true, a healthy brain, a healthy child, and healthy spiritual formation has the ability to recognize when things are hard and has the ability to move through and find comfort and care. So we want to teach our kids, our girls, how to recognize when they're hurting, how to ask for help, and how to find healthy care. So there's lots of different reasons why suffering happens, but the scriptures speak of 3 main themes, okay? So the first one happens to be because of the fall. There's a lot of things in this life that we can't point a finger at of why it happens, except that the world is broken. We learned this in Genesis 3. The garden was there. Adam and Eve had everything they needed. Fast forward, the division happens between God and between man and woman, and we have all kinds of hard things. We also have suffering because of our own choices. When we struggle in believing that God is good and we doubt him, and we have the enemy that's in the garden who still is trying to kill, steal, and destroy, and to steal our identity. We're all being tempted. And when we're tempted, we make bad choices, we sin, and then there's natural consequences. And the Bible talks about a third one called trials, when God is actually allowing some sort of hard suffering in our life so that we can grow muscles. Kind of like when you think about lifting weights and how the weight goes up and it's hard and you suffer and you're sore, it's that kind of trial. Now, do we know why we suffer? Do we always know the reason which one of these is causing our suffering for ourselves or for our girls? No. And I think we have to be very, very careful in telling our girls we know why something is happening to them. But instead of trying to figure out the why, God wants us to still move through the process of trusting him and trusting others to care for us through that suffering. So whether or not we understand why we have suffering, we can move through our suffering well. There's actually been 5 stages of grief that we understand that we move through when we're struggling with some sort of form of suffering. And again, this can be a small trial in our life to massive suffering that's not going to go away. Sometimes we have to live with the reality that hard things are going to be with us the rest of our life. Part of our job as parenting our daughters is helping them know the difference and what grief looks like. So there's 5 stages, and we've recently added a 6th. So I'm going to walk you through those stages so you understand what grieving looks like in your own life and in the life of your daughter. The first stage is shock or denial. It's a place where we are not willing to accept the reality of an impact that this suffering is having. And we kind of try to go through life as if it's normal and nothing's wrong. But when we're ready to start to face the reality of a suffering, we move towards sadness. Sadness is this deep sense of loss. It's kind of naming, it's not kind of, it actually is naming all the ways that the suffering has taken from us. What we used to know and now what we know. And we have to be able to name those. We have to be able to cry. We have to be able to be sad. And sometimes it can look like depression, but really it's circumstantial and moving through a process of just being sad. The third stage is anger. Now, anger is when we want to get angry at God. We get angry at ourselves. We get angry at each other. It's this intense emotion that actually needs to move, and it's this desire to have some sort of action step. So it can be intense depending on your daughter's personality and her way of moving through life. But we need a way to get rid of this anger. And so moving through physical action, being able to verbally vomit harsh words, to be able to hold that with your daughter is probably some of the most loving things you can do for her as she's moving through her grief. But it's hard. And sometimes we want to discipline that anger and we take it personally, but it's actually her moving through her grief. The next stage is something called bargaining or bartering, where we're looking back and we're kind of trying to go, what could have I done different to prevent this suffering from happening? Think about, if you've gone through cancer or you have someone in your family who is going through cancer, sometimes we just feel this sense of what could I have done different? Should I have ate better? Should I run more? Should I? And at the end of the day, there's probably a bazillion things we could have done, and we still would have had to face this suffering. And that's a hard reality of this stage, but it's also part of what we have to go through. The next phase is one where we're starting to move towards acceptance. It's kind of this place where we are able to live in the reality of what is and still have some hope that God is going to use this for good. The Romans 8:28, he uses all things for the good of those who love him. And oftentimes, it's hard to see it in the movement as we're moving through the grief and loss. But when we start to get to that acceptance stage, we can start to raise our heads up and to look out and to go, life can still be good. There's still beautiful things that are here. There's still more to me. There's still more to life. And then that sixth stage that mental health providers are starting to lean towards, we're calling it making meaning. And it's this ability to actually move our suffering into a storyline where we can say, in hindsight, I can see the gifts that this has brought. Now, often we want to jump, right? We want to jump over here and make meaning of any sort of suffering in our daughters' lives too quickly. And we want to rush this process because nobody likes to go through the suffering. Nobody likes going through sadness and anger and bargaining. It can be very slow. It can be roundabout and not very linear. So if you're in the middle of this right now with you or your daughter, know that God is with you. He's with her, he's with you, and he's holding you in the midst of this. And you know that colicky baby, when you're trying to draw in a baby that doesn't want to be held and is in a lot of pain, and you're like, come here, and they're arching their back and they don't want anything from you. That's similar sometimes when we're moving through suffering. And your daughter in her teen years, as she faces hard things into her young adult years, she might get like that with you. So don't force yourself in trying to hold her near, but allow her to move through the process and remind her that you are here with her, that you won't leave her. And get support if you need some help in knowing how to do this, especially with the bigger suffering that we're going through. But I want you, even if there's not a lot of hard going on right now, I want you to talk about this with your daughter and to prepare, to understand what grief is like, to know what to do when you're grieving. There's a few coping strategies that I lean into. One is talking. So if your daughter needs some space to just vent. Art or collaging. So you're going to get to collage during this lesson. Give it a try. Maybe you've never done it before, but there's something that happens in our neurobiology and in our healing process when we create with our hands and we give the emotions that we're feeling on the inside an expression on the outside. This collaging is not about the product, so please do not make it about how pretty it is. It's about the process of putting emotions and feelings and hope onto a piece of paper. Another one is physical movement. We need to be able to move our bodies and help flesh out and to give ourselves a fresh dose of dopamine and some healthy hormones as we're moving through. And the last one is journaling. If you can help your daughter to start journaling, to be able to talk to God about what's really going on inside her, that'll give her a chance to begin trusting God with the deepest, most inner thoughts that she has and feelings. So I know I walked you through some pretty heavy stuff here, but I know that God is going to use this, if not for now, down the road when your daughter is going through some difficult pieces. And I hope at the least it's helping you as you reflect on your own suffering in your journey. Thank you for being a mom who's pursuing your daughter's heart and helping her to grow in confidence, not only in her relationship with God, but knowing that she can stand tall, and no matter what her story, she can have courage to be able to live the life God has called her to live and know that He is using her no matter what she goes through.